So without further ado, I'll ask Lucas Peterson, sixth grade student from Thomas Jefferson, if you wouldn't mind starting his essay.
My name is Lucas Peterson, and I won the essay for the sixth grade level, and this is my essay. I only have one black friend. His name is Jarquavius. Before him, I had another black friend named Jamari, but he moved away. There's only two black friends that I can remember in my 12 years of life. Both were good at sports, and Jarquavius especially loved football. Football is my favorite too. All three of us were just trying to get through school so we had more time to play. Never thought about them being having different than me, or that either of them would experience racism. It isn't that I had a problem with having more black friends. There just isn't that many black kids at my school or any in my neighborhood. I live in Valparaiso, Indiana, where 87% of the population is the same color as me. I guess that situation is easy to ignore when almost everyone looks the same. In my mind, racism was in the past, and I honestly didn't believe it still existed. Even in school, teachers would walk around the subject and only discuss it in history classes. The last time I heard anything about it was on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The history of racism beyond slavery and the right to vote was rarely mentioned. They definitely never discussed the issues still plaguing the present. My parents also never barely discussed the subject with me. Most likely, their parents never had the discussion about racism with them either. Suppose teachers and parents can ignore a situation too when it isn't their own reality. After reading the book, I know racism still exists, but it's hard for me to truly understand. I haven't experienced racism before or even seen it happen to someone else. But I also know just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's real. Also doesn't make it okay. When I finished the book, I talked to my mom about what I read. She showed me a few videos about what was happening in the world, and my heart hurt even more. It saddens me to think that some people of color feel their only option is violence. They no longer believe the peaceful protests work, or that the enforcement and the law and the government are on their side. They feel like they need to do something drastic to get people's attention. I try to imagine what it would feel like to not get an opportunity or be heard because someone simply didn't like my name or the color of my skin. Think about Jarquavius and me being so similar, but one of us getting more opportunities and having a greater chance of success because of skin color, and not because of how hard we work. Honestly, it makes me angry, and it isn't even happening to me. I can't imagine how it makes people of color feel. My opinion, the first steps towards positive change in the world of racism is to talk about it. Teachers should talk about it, parents should talk about it, especially in areas like Valparaiso where you can't see racism in the everyday world. Many people ignore this situation because it doesn't affect them. If they took time to learn about what was happening, I am confident not all could turn the other way and pretend racism doesn't exist. I believe the majority of people in the world are good, and with proper understanding of racism, the world would demand change. Of course, there will still be some that will never change, some that will want to stay stuck in the past. Others may be scared to have those difficult conversations. For those people, all you can do is lead by example. Do your part to show what it means to be an anti-racist. Stand up for those who can't or refuse to stand up for themselves, not by violence or with angry riot, but with love and courage. Teach your children to do the same. I think each generation gets braver every year, and the kids of today will be the leaders of the revolution tomorrow. Racism has affected the world drastically. Even if we don't see it that often in Valparaiso, the reality is Jarquavius will likely experience racism many times in his life. It also is a reality that I will not. Despite this, it is my responsibility as his friend and a good citizen to stand up for him and fight against racism. Maybe by taking these actions, I can lessen the effects of racism in my community and my country. With time, the world will reign. And that's it.
Lucas, thank you for your thoughtfulness and your willingness to engage in such a really difficult topic, especially for our younger audiences. So thank you for your thoughtfulness and engaging in this contest and for your essay. let's take this time to allow my board colleagues, if they would introduce themselves before we hear from the next essay winner, please.
Welcome again, everyone. My name is Hugh McGuigan. I'm a board member at the Valparaiso International Center.
Welcome, everyone. Thank all of you for your efforts in participating in this essay contest. And my name is Anne Marie Marti, and I'm a BIC board member.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Dwayne Davison, founder of the Valparaiso International Center. Thank you very much to all participants, as well as the winners, Shelby and Lucas. I've talked to all of you on the telephone, and it's great to see a face behind those words. Thank you for participating.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Mary Casca. I'm a board member of the Valparaiso International Center. And I'd also like to thank all of the students who took the effort to read the book and to sit down and express themselves in the essay. We really appreciate the effort that you put into this and reading each one of your essays. And also want to thank the teachers who supported you in this effort. Thank you very much.
I'm Kevin Hagan, also a board member. Again, thank you for everyone joining us today. I'm sort of the person with the control behind the Zoom here. So if you have something you'd like to add, or I invite you to go to the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen and feel free to utilize that chat to pass messages around. I know we'll have conversation later, but let's utilize the chat so we can maximize our time. So again, thank you for joining us today.
Let's hear from our second essay winner, Shelby Prybell, who is a 10th grade student at Valparaiso High School. Shelby?
I'm Shelby Prybell. I'm the winner of the high school chapter, and this is my essay that I'm going to be reading. America is the land of the free, home of the brave. America is a sanctuary, a famed haven bursting with opportunities. It is a place that embraces you as you are and affords you every chance to succeed, as long as you are white. America was not land of the free for Black people until 1863. America was not home of the brave for all the overlooked, undervalued Black soldiers in the Civil War, World War I, or World War II. America was not a sanctuary or a haven during the era of segregation or when lynchings were prominent. America is not a place that embraces Black people as they are and affords them every chance to succeed. For me, racism has always been a very one-dimensional topic. If someone is labeled as racist, they are automatically registered as a terrible person. Upon reading Stamped, I came to the conclusion that racism has many faces. It is not enough to acknowledge that racism is bad. Plenty of things are universally recognized as bad, and we do little to nothing to stop them. Discrimination, the blatant or closeted hatred of a group of people based on their skin color, is not something that can be overlooked any longer. It is not enough to acknowledge that racism is bad. To truly break through the walls of racism that America was built around, society has to become anti-racist. Anti-racism, the act of cognizantly being against racism, the act of working for racial equality, of recognizing the suffering that Black people have experienced, the act of never giving up on a better America, an America where it will actually be land of the free, home of the brave. Racism has been a difficult subject for me to address. It's something I tiptoed around, using flowery language and broad generalizations. It's feeling dumb no matter what you write because it's coming across as performative. It's feeling selfish for feeling dumb because this isn't about you. It's a topic that I feel like I could never understand. A topic that I felt like I could never effectively communicate about because I am privileged, because I've never experienced racism, because I am white. And that is the problem. I had the privilege to ignore racism for 14 years. Partially, it was because I was a child. But mostly it was because it was something that I never had to fear. I never had to worry about being accosted on the side of the road or being shot while I was out for a run simply because I was reported as a suspicious figure. I have never been identified as a suspicious figure because I am white, because I am privileged. It's time. There can't be any more hiding behind delicate words and metaphors and feeling that you've successfully condemned racism. It's time. Time to outright say it. There is no place for racism in America. There is no such thing as inferior or superior people. There is no such thing as justifiable racism. It is unacceptable to read about the many crimes committed against Black people and suggest that they might have done something to deserve it. Nobody, no matter the color skin they have, deserves to be shot while sleeping, to have their neck kneeled on for 8 minutes, to be hunted while out for a run. It's not going to change overnight. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be a journey that starts with education, with the willingness to listen, with simple compassion. There are going to be mistakes, confrontations, uncomfortable conversations, but it's a step that needs to be taken. At the end of the day, we are all just a blip on the radar, a speck in the grand scheme of the universe. There has been hate, pain, and suffering before us, and there will be hate, pain, and suffering after us. What we do now, however, is what will determine the course of our future. We can use a short time in this world to fuel hate, to feed the fires of racism and injustice, to discriminate without basis. Or we can use this time to fight for equity, for justice, for the idea that compassion and love conquer all. I choose to use my voice to make a difference. Thank you.
Shelby, thank you for your essay and for your courage in recognizing and your shared empathy in recognizing lived experiences and how those lived experiences can, how you share and understand those lived experiences of others who don't necessarily identify the same way as you do. So thank you for your thoughtful and engaging essay. For all those who participated, thank you for the opportunity of allowing us to hear your voices on such a topic that, again, is very difficult sometimes to have with individuals. So thank you for your bravery and your willingness to engage in that conversation. While we're fresh on the topic, I'd love to hear from other students, participants who took the time and, as mentioned, the courage to write about this. If you guys would want to chime in, I can get us started in terms of just kind of asking a question, and I'd love to hear from our other participants. And that question is, how have your interactions changed, specifically with your friends and peers, since reading this text? How are you seeing your interactions and how are you seeing the world differently as a result of reading this book? Certainly we can start with our essay winners, but we'd love to hear from our other participants as well.
After reading the book, it's definitely like opened my eyes, and like I've definitely like felt like different, like more like equal with others, and thought about it differently. Like when I see someone, I think of them as equal always now. Like it's just a different perspective.
When I look at other people that aren't my skin color, I try to not think of them differently and try to express them like I would another person just like me.
Thank you both. Yeah. Or some other perspectives. How's your interactions changed?
When I was reading, like it talked about how when you see like a Black person, you want to see them as different. You don't want to see like, you don't want to be like colorblind, and you don't want to see them as like the same person. Like it's good to like see them as different, but like still treat them as equal as you would other people.
This is Jen Hurley chiming in. Sorry for my very informal background, but just hearing from Lily, Caitlin, and Opal, we had some calls leading up to the contest, and this is some of what we discussed in terms of, how are things going to be different? And I know one thing pretty much most participants in those calls talked about was the idea of having the new terminology, the new language to really just better understand the issue itself, so that when we're looking at how to approach making changes, we have a better understanding of it. So girls and others, I don't know if you want to chime in on that, because I know that was something that helped, like assimilation, who's a racist, who's an anti-racist, that type of thing, if that helps with conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear those. I'd love to hear the perspective of those who were engaged in that conversation. So thank you for those who've already spoken, and love to hear some more.
Well, before, as you guys heard, my essay was mostly about my best friend, Jarquavius. And before reading this book and writing this essay, I never really thought about him being different. He was just a normal kid to me. And now I'm like, after reading that, I feel like he definitely could experience something like that. Not just kind of, yeah, just Yeah, it definitely
Open your eyes to
showed
it.
something that I didn't really see before.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. One of the things I think Caitlin mentioned too was seeing the idea of not being colorblind and seeing others as different. And I'm wondering what you guys think about that in terms of interaction and engagement, right? And recognizing that it's important not to be colorblind, because in being colorblind, we potentially don't recognize the individual for who that individual is. So any thoughts on that?
I think it's important that we're not colorblind. Like, we still need to recognize differences, but like keep respect and still treat others equal.
Try to recognize that people are different from you, but you don't want to treat them differently than you would anybody else.
I also agree with like what both of you said, that it's important to see others for who they are and not judge them based on what stereotypes that that person might be. At my school, it's very hard for other people like my classmates to see that because we don't experience it. Like I go to a prominently white school. We probably have like 4 people of color in our entire high school and middle school combined. So just like we've had some incidents where those kids have experienced racism firsthand, and it like hurts if those people would take those stereotypes and apply it to those people just because they're not used to living in an area where like more people of color live and everything. So I just think that people need to treat a person based on how they know them, not based on what stereotypes are telling them how to treat people. Like every person's different and they should be treated as a person, not stereotypes and like the world is based people off of.
Thank you for your thoughts, Desiree.
Yeah, I also agree with what she had to say. I think it's really important to have these different perspectives so that we can use our privilege to become better allies for people and to celebrate their cultures and traditions.
Thank you, Giovanna.
Yeah, going along with both what Desiree and Giovanna said, it's really interesting to see the firsthand racism, especially in our schools. Like, I go to Valparaiso High School. It is not just on the news. It is not just these big stories. It is right here in our schools, in our community. And it's very disheartening to know just the amount of racism that is literally like in front of us. Like, I'm sure the other students can speak to this, especially at the high school level, every single day. So I definitely agree with what they said.
I will chime in and say I think that's really where that student voice is so important, because of course, faculty and staff are trying to be aware and watch what's going on and intercede where they can, but those peer-to-peer interactions are probably where it needs to be addressed most, and perhaps faculty aren't there in some of those situations. So students having a voice and understanding how to speak against it and how to fight it, I think is really important. So great work pointing that out, Carolyn.
Maggie on the chats, I just wanted to give voice to Maggie on the chat, who articulates that, says, I listened to radio like WBZ, so before reading it, it was just like hearing about terrible things and feeling like I couldn't do anything. But after reading the book, I was glad that other people were hearing and paying attention too. I was glad that it was kind of like a sort of a school essay thing, because usually in school, it is never talked about, which is really interesting because, I think it was Caroline was pointing out that, apparently, the students would certainly know more than the faculty and staff, is that this is happening from a peer-to-peer, this is happening on a peer-to-peer basis. So my question now is, like, how do you respond to that, right? Like, when you see this happening, when you see this engaged, how do you respond to these in situations? And now that you've read the book, and how's your perception, how are you inclined to say to your peers when you see when these things are happening, especially for those giving voice to those who may see themselves as voiceless in this situation, especially thinking about being in institutions where those individuals are not part of the predominant community? How do you feel armed to address these issues now? It looked like Valerie Hearns was getting ready to say something, and I don't know if you still want to.
Well, one thing feel like I could do differently is maybe kind of making sure I'm not doing anything against other people or not being colorblind, because that doesn't help the situation either. If you're colorblind, then you're not addressing that person as what they look like or them. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. What are some other ideas? How do you feel empowered now to react when you see this happening, especially to your peers and to your friends?
For me, it's just generally when you see these things happening at school or in the hallways, it's a scary thing to interject because you don't want to get anybody mad at you. And it's really shallow when you think about it, because you should always stand up for what's right. But for me, just the advice that I try to keep in mind is to be kind to everybody, because a lot of hate that I see, it just stems from ignorance, and you can't blame somebody for perpetuating something when they don't know any better. So I just try to go about all my interactions with kindness and just trying to further education among the community.
Yeah, exactly what Shelby said. If I ever saw that, I would have. I feel like it's difficult to say something because you don't want to hurt anyone else, but you also want to like
Help your friend.
help
Yeah.
everyone out. So it's just difficult because you don't want to be thought of because some people would think of it as, I don't know,
A tattletale. Or
yeah, something like that.
Mom's over here too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's hard to think of everything.
I think it can be scary. It can be scary to kids to stand up to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. Especially part of the idea of wanting to fit in and being among your peers and not, not wanting to be that person, right? That person or maybe it's said as a joke, or it's supposed to not be offensive, or it's supposed to be, loosen up. This is, we're just kidding around. How does that, that's letting that go, right? What are we risking by letting those types of jokes go and not addressing those and not pointing out to the joke teller or for those even around us who are laughing at those and saying, like, this is potentially harmful. This is, this is harmful to the person. We may be seeing it as a joke now, but what are we doing? What kind of environment are we establishing when we're not addressing these moments and taking opportunities to defend those who may be the punchline for that joke, right? So again, how do the students feel in terms of now having kind of the language to be able to and the vocabulary to be able to speak about this in a more substantial way?
But I know, at least for me, I've been in several conversations where the people I'm talking with have used racial slurs to try to be humorous or whatever their reason is. And I do have to admit, it is hard to stand up. But of course, I know in the back of my mind that is the right thing to do. And the way that I go about it is just watching how I word what I'm saying to them, because if you say it in a way where they feel like they're just not going to say it around you, but they're going to say it around other people who they don't view as sensitive. So I think you just have to watch how you're wording it to get it across in the right message.
I definitely think that if people keep letting jokes go in situations or laugh at them because they think it's funny, then they don't see anything wrong with the situation. So I've definitely had classmates that have said stuff, and just the intolerance that they think it's okay, that they think it's funny when it's not, that they're just saying it because their friends think it's funny when it's really insensitive. And it's hard because we have such a small school with people that have all the same opinions and all the same viewpoints, that they don't see the outside problems. They just think everything they say is funny and that it's okay to say that. But I definitely think if my whole class would have had to read this book and understand a lot of the history that we aren't taught in school, that they might not be making as many jokes because they understand that it's not as funny, that all these people have had to experience this in the past and why it's built up and why all these problems that are happening today are very serious, that making jokes about it isn't funny.
I would say that even if somebody is joking about it, you should mention that it's not nice and that some people have to actually go through certain things just because their skin color is different than ours, or even if just certain people are treated differently because of their different skin color.
One thing that was said earlier a little bit, I'm thinking if to address something, that if someone has a joke or something, you might want to think like, would you say that around somebody with a different skin color? And if not, you should probably ask or address it, or if it's a joke to someone else, then, or to a person with black skin, it should be okay.
I think that if it if someone thinks that it could be a joke to them, it could hurt someone's feelings, and even if they aren't black, it could have an impact on a white person because they have empathy for other people, and if they put each other and if you put someone in someone else's shoes, then you just feel bad for other people.
I feel to at least dilute it in our schools and stuff like that. Just, I feel like if we do something about it, it might start becoming the normal for your friends, and that can go into their friends and then their friends, and then it'll just, spread like crazy. Then yeah, I feel like it just takes one step for us to stand up for someone, and then hopefully it'll take time, but hopefully it'll become the normal.
Yeah, I agree with what you said completely. I think it's important that we educate our friends, and if we start telling them and then they start going off of what we're saying, hey, it's not okay that you're saying this, it's really offensive and it's not okay that you're doing this. I think that it could eventually get somewhere, but you also have people are very strong with their beliefs, and if it's going to be hard to educate others who are very strong-willed and don't want to change what they already believe, they are not open to change. And with what Shelby said earlier, you try to be she tries to be kind in when she's addressing the situations to people, but in some situations when it's really offensive, I think you just need to get your idea across. I don't think it's necessarily about being kind in the situation. If you want change to happen, you have to be strong and you have to get your voice heard. So if you're I have very offensive people in my school, and being nice to them is not going to change their minds. You have to be confident in what you're saying and just call them out, and what they're saying is racist, because they're not going to change their opinions unless they keep getting told over and over by more people that, hey, what you're saying is not okay. And at my school, they don't get yelled at for it. The teachers never say anything, and it's very hard to hear this in classrooms and hear this in the hallways and no one says anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. It really only takes one time to just be firm and confident saying your beliefs, and reading this book definitely would help me in those situations, knowing how to get it across, and it just to be able to say something to them that they'll remember, so then they'll feel that, oh, I probably shouldn't be saying that anymore, and then hopefully they won't say that around other people too.
I feel like it's especially hard if they've been your best friend for a very long time and then they just say something racist. Then I feel like it is very difficult to say, hey, don't say that. It's just because you've been their friends, you've trusted them for a very long time, and it just becomes a lot more difficult.
I feel like if the whole school read this, then a whole entire different turn would happen, and a lot more people would recognize that this is a real thing and this is happening not only in schools but out of schools, and that it's not something just to joke about because it's happening in real events and people are actually getting severely hurt because of it.
I agree with what Lucas said earlier about it's hard when it's someone that's been your friend for a very long time, like to say something to them, because it puts you in an awkward situation because you don't want them to hate you because you're calling them out for being racist. But then again, you don't agree with anything they said. Like they think, like you think what they said is very wrong. So it does put you in an awkward situation. But I really think at the end of the day that you need to stand up to your friend and say, hey, what you said is not cool. You really need to stop doing that because it's very offensive. And I know you don't realize it, but in like when you go outside this small little town and you actually experience it and you say that, it's going to offend a lot of people and it's not okay. So I think it is really hard to say something when they are your best friend. I've had some instances with some friends and I could just try to educate them more so they don't keep saying it to other people just because they're not around me. They might not say it. Like I try to educate them and think like, hey, this is not okay. You need to realize what you're saying is not okay and you could get in trouble for it. You're just lucky that no one around is going to get you in trouble, that what you're saying is not okay.
My mom just told me something that I thought was kind of interesting. I feel like some people like almost don't know or educated enough. Like if someone said it and they thought it was funny, they might say it to make it seem like they're funny, something like that, but they really aren't educated enough to like really understand.
Yeah, sometimes people don't say it to be mean necessarily. They're just kind of ignorant to that part of the world. And I think that happens a lot here in Valpo because we don't have as many minorities in this city as some places do. And so a lot of us don't understand, you know, how do we make people of color feel more comfortable and feel like they're supported, you know?
Maggie in the chat notes, in school, especially in elementary, teachers seem to like what I call the McDonald's metaphor. It goes like, hey kids, what if I said you had brown eyes or green eyes? I would take you to McDonald's. If you had different eyes, I wouldn't. You would feel bad, right? Kids nod. Then the teacher starts talking about something else or whatever. Not like they explain or talk about it much. Just mention, make sure kids acknowledge that racism is bad, move on. It always seemed lacking, and I never know what to say. It's a great point. And really interesting to hear, and thought-provoking to hear students, the students acknowledging that, you know, we're hearing these comments, we're hearing these ideas that are being passed around in our schools. And as Lucas Mums was saying, is that, you know, being at Valpo, there aren't that many underrepresented people. So these kinds of conversations can happen certainly and go unnoticed or under the radar, and no one calls them out. So hearing you guys articulate the willingness to even call in, I don't like to use that term call out, but call in your peers when you hear these conversations, I think, you know, certainly we can argue is a right step, is a step in the right direction, right? In having these conversations. And I think having them at such a foundational part of, you know, students' lives is really important. And hopefully thinking about how to disrupt the pattern that we see that's kind of led us to where we are today, right? And I think that's really important. And I think along those lines, it'd be great to, at this point in our program, to hear from the educators, the individuals who are setting the examples for our students, and what great example it is to see this many students and these many conversations and insights today. So why don't we start with Dr. McCall, who's the superintendent of Valparaiso schools, community schools, if you wouldn't mind sharing some comments with us, Dr. McCall.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Congratulations to Lucas and Shelby for winning the contest, but also to all of the young writers for having the courage to participate and to read and think and write about their thoughts and experiences. I think it's very powerful. I used to be an English teacher, and I certainly applaud reading to provoke writing in order to really understand how we think and evolve that thinking. So thank you to the VIC for sponsoring and allowing the schools to promote it as we did with our students in order to have them participate. And hearing the conversation today, it's really gratifying to listen to everyone's journeys. And really, I think that's really important to keep in mind that it's going to be a continuous journey as we move through together on our own understandings, but also as we impact those around us and our communities. Students especially, when we're entering into middle school, I know Miss Hurley, working at TJ Middle, sees it all the time. Students are trying to understand themselves and their own identities to make sense of it. Understand their cultures even. And by doing so, then they're able to understand others as well. And those conversations are really important. I appreciate very much this understanding the difference between being colorblind. Sometimes people use that as a phrase of defense when it's really the opposite. It's what we cannot do. We need to see and celebrate and be curious about each other. We need to speak and listen some more. Through those conversations is where we grow. And it's really important to keep that in mind, is to celebrate those differences. I think about an organization, a club such as STAND that we've had for many years, socially together and naturally diverse. And I think that's one of the core principles, is that we do see differences, but we want to use those as vehicles for understanding our similarities as well. So as an educator, that's our job, is to help students grow academically and intellectually, of course, but also socio-emotionally and as citizens. And so having these conversations wherever we can is really a critical function as educators. Students have the power to make a difference, and we want to empower their voice to do so. And so the students who witness or hear things that are unconscionable or offensive in the halls or out in society, don't hesitate to say something, but sometimes that something is to a trusted adult as well, so that we can intervene and make it right. And we do that through not just discipline, but also through restorative justice, through talking circles, and through that growth that we talk about. So again, I applaud everyone for their participation and look forward to more discussions on this topic. So thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Dr. McCall. Jennifer Hurley, I think we heard from earlier, but we'd love to hear some more from you in terms of the work that you've done with the students to get them prepared for these conversations, and thank you for your engagement with these students in terms of this topic and getting them prepared.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I have to say, I was so impressed to work with our young students and hear what they had to say about a topic that I think even adults struggle to really articulate and understand how to address. And my role really just came in, students needed access to the book. And so I started figuring out how that could happen in our school libraries and community, and then invited students to participate in, I think we did biweekly calls to talk about the reading of the book and then also what kind of writing they were doing. And the students stepped up and they talked about what they were seeing, asked questions, in addition to sharing, like, this is what I have written so far. And so they could give one another feedback. And, really do see how much our young people can make a difference by being aware. And also, I really like that Dr. McCall had pointed out this idea of, if we're experiencing something, to make sure we are also involving those trusted adults, because we're definitely all in this together and wanting, the same results. And someone earlier had mentioned the idea of empathy. And I know through our media center materials, as well as, other conversations that are happening in the classroom, that through reading, we really can learn about what others experience. And even if we're not experiencing it ourselves, by understanding what that experience is, it helps to temper maybe some jokes we might make that we don't think are as serious as actually they are. So it's really been a pleasure. And we don't have everyone who participated in the reading of the book and or submitting the essay like on this forum today, but it was very, very impressive to see how many students wanted to step up and get involved in this.
I think we also have, is Michelle Koberg on here? Yes, Michelle, would love to hear from you. Thank you for being here and your work with the students. In the meantime, Dwayne, did you want to take the minute and do some remarks?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I want to thank you for hosting this forum. You're fantastic in this role. Certainly want to thank Jim McCall for joining us. He was very supportive of this effort on behalf of the Valparaiso Community Schools from the beginning, especially through announcements at the high school, and then enlisting Jennifer Hurley to add two things. She did a great job behind the scenes. I think there were a number of students who did not submit essays, but at least were part of the conversation behind the scenes, and thanks to her, for that. Desiree, I'm happy that you're here. You lend a small town experience from Couts that we don't have otherwise. So thank you for your participation. For all of you, when I was your age, I'm not sure that I could articulate in words or on paper what you guys have done. So I'm super impressed with that. When we as a board read all of our essays, I just thought, some are 12, 13, 15 years old, and to put your thoughts out there on a very complicated topic like this is very impressive. You were writing for an audience that you didn't know, so you had to get out of your comfort zone. You didn't know any of us, and then now even just sharing these moments on this virtual forum is impressive again. So I applaud each one of you and encourage you to do those things that you've mentioned that you feel empowered to do now. Finally, if you could just make sure you see in the chat at the beginning of the chat, there's some information on WVLP local radio station, where some of the students that you see here, a couple of others that aren't joining us today, will be part of the live radio program that Jennifer Hurley will also be on. So please check that out. Thanks a lot, Richard.
Hi, I'm Michelle Coburg. I'm now Michelle Harris. I got married somewhere in the middle of the contest. And I had, I think, 8 students participate. I had more than 8 read the book. Some ran out of time reading the book to write the essay. And I think I have 3 on today that are on the Zoom call. I hope that my students feel like I do a really good job, promoting books from different authors and different cultures. But I know even as an educator, the amount of time that I wish I had to go into the depth of explaining things or teaching things, doesn't do it justice. The last month, I did a whole month on potentially controversial issues. We did First Chapter Fridays, where I introduced books that had maybe considered taboo topics, and things that are uncomfortable to listen to and uncomfortable to read about, and showed book trailers and talked about the authors and the authors' backgrounds. And I'm hoping that my students seemed to be intrigued and interested as I was reading that. But when this stamped essay contest came around and I introduced it to my students, I went to VU, and I had a very profound professor named Dr. Victoria Chiatula, and she's from Nigeria. And I contacted her, and we did about an hour and a half phone call on talking about how to teach Black history and how to teach Black History Month. And yes, it's kind of comes around as the month, because that's, as we start talking about it. But how do I even introduce that conversation? And how do I do a good job facilitating that type of conversation? Because as an educator, as a teacher, it can be dicey. And I don't want to make anybody in the room feel uncomfortable or like they don't have a safe space to speak. And at the same time, I don't want anyone saying anything that is going to potentially cause a long-term termination of relationships. So we went over, how do you really pose questions and have good conversations and good open conversations with students without where they feel open enough to speak. And they might say something offensive because that's what's on their mind or in their heart. And you want them to feel open to say that. However, how do you kind of dig out of that if that happens? And she really helped me and really walked me through, having some of those conversations with students. And I'm hoping next year to bring her in as a speaker, to talk about some of those things. She's an incredible professor, and I was so blessed to have her. And I've been out of school a while, and I still contact her for help with those things. I am really thankful that I have such wonderful kids who are willing to read the book and put the effort into it, and did it on their own time. And I feel like I hope that my students, the ones that are here, could, I guess, vouch or not vouch, right? That I feel like my class is a safe space. I think they know, that I'm pretty intolerant of not being respectful of each other. And I really applaud them for going over and above with a topic that is they don't necessarily get a lot of outside knowledge on or a lot of help with, like when they were doing the essays. I mean, they had the biweekly meetings, but really they did this. They did this on their own, so I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
No, absolutely. And this is a great stopping point. I think that's even more impressive that, again, that, students were taking this on their own time and their own free will and goodwill in wanting to have these conversations. And that just, to me, is heartwarming and a sign of certain growth in terms of where we are as a community. And certainly I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be, right? I don't want it to be that, we go back to our normal lives and think like everything's fixed in this community as a result of, this essay or this, hour-long conversation. But this is a great start. This is an incredible start in terms of having the individuals who are one day going to be the leaders, not only in our communities, but far wide, that, they're having these conversations and recognizing empathy and respect, and how to engage with individuals in a way that honors their individuality and who they are as individuals. And I think that's really important to have these conversations. And thank you for the participants, and thank you for the parents and loved ones and those who are finding a way to nurture these conversations, and certainly for the educators who are also being brave and willing to have these conversations in a way that fosters honesty and integrity in our students, and in the ways in that when we're talking about this. As I mentioned before, I hope that we have opportunities to meet again and have conversations and have even more engaging insight in terms of how we can break the cycle and ways that we can, again, make this community and make the world, hopefully, right? But we got to start somewhere, a more tolerable and equitable space. On that note, thank you again for joining us on behalf of the VIC. This has just been a really great conversation. A million thanks to the students who participated. You should be very proud of yourselves. We're very proud of you for what you've done, and whatever we can do to help support you. I know this is a tough road to travel, but whatever we can do to support you, please let us know. I know you have educators and parents and loved ones who are willing to support your willingness to step up and be a strong ally. So thanks again, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks to all the participants.
Yes,
We're off to a good start.
absolutely. If the VIC members could stick around, please. Thank you.